friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa Stringworks Workshop. I'm actually interrupting the front of this video to insert this information. First of all, we have two contests running, and yesterday was actually the deadline to enter those contests. Today's September 1st. So I will get around to judging those contests as soon as I can. I am just swamped and don't have time today to do it. I actually started editing the video you're about to see at noon today, September 1st, and it is now presently 6:35 in the evening, and I figure I've got at least another hour's worth of work to do before I'm finished editing this video. So, I wanted to insert in front of this video to let you know also that this one is a little bit special in that I'm going to be showing a lot of tips and tricks through this video. Some on sharpening tools, but also on carving this top. I will be tapping the top to let you hear the note that it makes. And I recorded that on a little better speaker. Actually, you can probably see it in the corner of the video right there, that little Yeti microphone. I used that to record it, and it does pick it up pretty well. It's maybe not quite studio quality, but it picks it up pretty darn well. And I think you can hear it much better with that. Now, the reason I'm telling you that up front here is that you should be listening to this, if you care about that, you should be listening to this on a better set of speakers. If you're just using a little tablet like I do, you won't hear what you're going to hear on a large set of speakers or on a better sound system. So if that's something that's important to you, I would recommend you view this video on something that you can hear the speakers really well. Now, that doesn't come till very late in the video. Don't know exactly where, sorry. That's about it. I just wanted to tell you about the contest and about the speakers, and that there are a lot of tips coming up in this particular video. I hope you enjoy it, and give me a thumbs up, man. I really hope you will. Thank you. Hello friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa Stringworks Workshop. This is a significant day in that it is day one of the next mandolin build. We're going to call this the West Virginia mandolin. Here's where we're at right now. I've already thickness sanded these two boards, and I've edged them, took them out in the bright sun, held it up to the sun, and it passed the test. There's no light shining through here at all. Now right here at the very end, the last 3/4 of an inch, there's a little bit of snipe there from the jointer, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. The pattern's not going to hit there anyway, and that'll be cut out, so that's not a big deal. But the rest of it from between here and the end, it is perfect. It is absolutely perfect. So that's going to be a very tight joint. So we're going to glue it up now. Here we go. Using my Tight Bond Original, tried and true. And most of the time on this kind of thing, I just spread it with my finger. It's the easiest way I know of to spread it. You can do it with a brush. I'm just going to wipe down the extra glue there and put some little clamps right on the ends to keep it good and flat. I think you can see I put an extra clamp here on both ends, plastic there to keep the glue from sticking, and then, you know, flat pieces here and clamped them together to keep the top perfectly flat. I don't always do that, but it's not a bad practice. Now we'll put one across the top the opposite way and tighten it down. And the only other thing I'm going to do is double check the center here just to make sure it's perfectly flat, and it is. It's just as flat as a pancake, so that's perfect. We'll just let that set overnight, and we'll be ready to start carving. Hello friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa Stringworks Workshop. I don't have my typical t-shirt on because I've been elected to go pick up my grandson from his pre-K class that he just started this week. He is so excited. And it's just falls to be my duty to do that today since nobody else is available to do it. And I'm, after all, retired. I have nothing else to do. I have about 1 hour, or actually a little less, before I have to leave. So let's see what we can do about getting started on this new mandolin. I've got the boards joined together, ready to go. This is the top. As you can see on my plan, or on my pattern, I have this marked as the top, and therefore all I really need to do is trace it and get her cut out. So before I do that though, what I'm going to do is mark this center line here a little bit better, because once you get the pattern over it, it's not that easy to see, and I don't want to make a mistake and get the pattern off just by a hair, which I have done that once before, and it was really a bummer. So we have enough time. I think we can get that cut out on the bandsaw.
A rose so sweet, it sounds so neat, my Rosa mandolin. I know the top is scratched up from years of constant play. With brand new strings, this beauty rings just as true today. Created by a master with detail in his mind. A rose so sweet, it sounds so neat, my Rosa mandolin. Built to chop the rhythm and play a fast lead line. With calloused hands created, one plain stroke at a time. Treasured now forever, wood and heart entwined, I wouldn't take.
Well, there you go. I have a bandsaw with a little finer blade, and I will take it over there and cut the rest of that out.
A million for my Rosa mandolin.
We're at the belt sander. The seam here is almost perfect, but it's not perfectly level. So I'm just going to kind of rotate this around and just make sure we got a good flat seam.
Dad said it's your birthday. Let's walk.
I believe that'll be good enough. I will check it for flatness, but the center here is just down a little bit, but the rest of this seems to be real good and flat, and that's all that really matters, is that the outside edge is flat. Well, we got her cut out, and I also ran it across the belt sander just to flatten out this back real good, make sure it's good and flat, and it appears to be really good and flat. I don't see any open spots anywhere. So we're just about ready to start doing the wood removal here on a major scale. I'm going to just check the overall thickness to see where it's at, because I like to start at the more or less final thickness plus a couple 20 thousandths or so. I don't want it to be too thick. We're at about 20 thousandths thicker than final dimension here, so that looks good to me. It's perfect for starting to carve. We're going to, first thing we're going to do is thin down these edges to a uniform thickness, so that when I carve everything, I'll have a target to go to. I'm just doing this freehand. There's no guide or anything. I'm just trying to knock down some of these edges. It doesn't really matter if I go in a little too far. I'm only going in about 3/4 of an inch. I could probably go in 1.5 inches and I'd be okay, but I'm only going in about 3/4 of an inch all the way around, and as long, I can do that easily by freehand and not really have to worry. It won't be deep enough. We'll have to go around it a second time. The first time, keeps it from busting out too much if you don't go too deep. So there you go.
Bluegrass show. We sat somewhere toward the front, the 6th or 7th row. The man on stage was talking.
That did a pretty good job on the first time around. I'm going to measure the thickness here and decide how far to drop this down.
He called me by my name. I finished it this morning for this special boy.
Well, that looks good. I left plenty of room around here where it's going to taper down, and up here this could all be taken down too. I might actually just turn it around and take a little bit off of there.
Birthday. It was a tree sawn into boards. He'd begun to give it life.
Well, as you can see, the top is prepped for carving. Now all that's left to do is to carve away everything that is not a mandolin. I know I am completely, fully aware of all the other methods to do this. CNCs, I know about, using hand grinders, sanders on the drill press. I know all of that. That's not how I do it. I do it with this. And actually, this is the first time that I'll be using my new tool that a viewer friend sent me. And I believe this came from Lee Valley Tools, and it's basically a small finger plane, which is what I've always used just between my fingers, but this one has the additional palm assist push, so hopefully hogging this out will be a little less strain on my end of my fingers. So thank you very much to my wonderful viewer friend. Might have to sharpen it a little bit more. I believe this is the way it came from the factory. It's pretty sharp. It actually is pretty sharp, but it's not as sharp as I prefer them, and I may have to do a little bit of a setup adjustment on it. It's going to hog it out good. I can tell that the stress on my fingers is going to be a lot less. I mean a lot less. But I will have to do some adjustments here on the blade. I've already sharpened this on my whetstone. Now I'm going to just strop it here on the leather, and it's really sharp, I can tell already. I think the one difference on this blade than what I'm used to is that there's more curvature on this blade than the curve that I generally put on there. I may go ahead, I'm going to leave it on there for now because maybe I'll find I like it. Typically I don't have quite as much curve as this. I would say the radius on this might be, 3 or 4 inches or something, maybe 5 or 6 inches, I don't know. But I typically put a little less radius than that on there.
Slowly chipping at the wood, traditional design.
It's very sharp, I can tell you that much. Let's just see what that does. It'll take me a little while to get used to this new tool. I don't feel like I've got the same control as I do when I'm right down there on it, but it sure is easier on my fingers, I can tell that. Anyway, for hogging this out, this is probably going to be perfect. Just take a little bit of getting used to. For the record, I've carved a mandolin top with a sander before, and fine-tuned it with finger planes, and that worked pretty well. Matter of fact, it worked real well. But ever since that particular mandolin, which just happened to be my very first mandolin, I've done it this way all the way through. Because this is actually pretty fast, believe it or not. It's faster than it looks, and it's really not that hard. I'm struggling a little bit with this tool, but I figure I'm going to use this tool and learn to use it because I just need to save my fingers for the detail instead of wearing them out here on the rough out. For the record, I've also carved a whole base top from scratch with a skill saw. And I'm talking about one of those circular blades. I held the guard up and used it like kind of like a draw knife with the thing running and carved the whole base top that way. Sold the base to the first person that looked at it. And I wasn't planning to sell it at all. The guy says, "What would you take for that?" I said, "Oh, I don't know. I really don't want to sell it. I'd have to have at least $1,000. And the guy says, "I'll take it." And he handed me $1,000 and walked off. And I wish I still had that base, doggone it. I wish I wouldn't have priced it at all. It was a nice base, very nice base. And you couldn't tell that it was carved with a skill saw, I will tell you that. Because I've got down with detail tools and smoothed it out, of course. There's a learning curve here. It may be that there's just too much curve on this blade. I think I may have to knock it down a little bit. It's kind of aggressive with that extra curve on there, and it's building up chips in this thing here. It's more of a problem with the mechanics than it is the carving. I'm not sure just what the problem is yet, but it's jamming up pretty bad, and I've got it set fairly shallow, so I don't know what the problem is. I'll figure it out though. I'm going to level that end off and resharpen that. This will be a little bit of a refresher for those of you who saw my video on hollow grinding. I'll put a link to that video in the description, or put it on the screen here, one of the two or both. You can see there I've reground it. It's still got a slight arch to the blade, but nowhere near as round as it was. And you can see there's just one continuous grind, and you can see how thin that grind goes. That's a hollow grind, and it's one grind. You don't see a bunch of marks there. That's from the grinder. It's just from the grinder. There's been no honing at all. And it already shaves. I'm not saying it shaves like a razor, but you can shave hair with it already. It's a little jaggedy because of the grinder. But it does shave. So now we will just take our time and hone this. The hollow grind is longer grind, and it'll find the flat just because the edge and the back heel will be riding on the stone. The center of that is ground out because of the hollow. And therefore, you can find the flat really easy, and you just wiggle it. I kind of rock it on that curved edge, and as I'm doing this, and I just keep that front edge touching. I'm not pressing real hard, and I'll lay this flat on the back now and just work off the little burr that comes up there. Lay it back on the cutting edge. I imagine that's probably all we need to do. Now you should be able to see that the grind has been on just the edges. See how the center is still not honed. The center across there has not touched the stone. It's the front edge and the back edge have touched the stone. That hollow grinding is the most precise way to sharpen anything. I'm telling you, once you learn how to do that, you'll thank me, you'll bless me. Now we'll just hone it on this kind of oil-soaked leather, and you just pull it away from the edge on that. That's how I do it. If it's ever going to shave, it's going to shave now, and you'll see the hair's just falling off. And it doesn't take all that much. People spend hours doing this sort of thing. I spend about 3 or 4 minutes. Okay, so let's see what it does. Oh, just like butter. They're just falling off. Can you see the hairs just falling off? Look. Very, very sharp now. You got to be careful. You'll cut yourself really easy. But it does shave very well. I'm going to hone it just a little bit more. It's ready to try it again. I kind of think it'll cut better now because it's not quite as round. Now the bottom on this is very round. So, I don't know. We'll just have to see. Maybe I made a mistake here. That's the shape of the blade that I always use and have been using for 30-some years, and it works great on everything else. Let's hope it works on this. Let's try that. I don't know. Maybe no better. Okay, I probably have it set a little shallow now because it's not as aggressive of a cut. Let me go ahead and set it just a hair deeper. I think that's better already. I can tell, and it's not locking up inside of here like it was. I think what I might do now, I hate myself, but I might actually hone some of this curvature off the bottom here. I think it's just a little too curved for my taste. It makes it follow the grooves too easily. When you get too much curve, then you stay in the curve. You don't get to move it around. It just keeps. It's like going down a log chute. It wants to drive right down that same one you just cut. So it's just too curved to suit my taste. We're going to straighten that out a little bit right now, and I'm not sure how I'm going to do that. I'll be perfectly honest. I don't think I've ever had to do that before, but we definitely got to take a little bit of curve off the bottom of this thing.
His talent beyond measure.
I think I helped it some. I don't think I did too much to it to damage it. I broaden the arc right here to the width of the blade. I didn't get up on the outer edges of this, but I think that's really all I need. Let's see how it works. That sander left that really pretty smooth. I've got some 320 here though. I think that'll make it even smoother, and maybe I'll have to go even finer, but right now I'm just going to try the 320. I think that'll be good enough. Let's just go with that for now and see how that does and see if that improved my cut any. Off camera, I put quite a few more tweaks on this. I went back and ground some more off the bottom. I went back to the regular grinder and ground a little bit more curve back into the blade just to try to make them match up. I had it too flat for this bottom and it was just too curvy to start with. So now we've reached kind of a happy medium. Now it seems to be peeling it off just right. I like it now. It's easy on my hand, and it's much better to me than it was when it got here. I would highly recommend you not accept it the way it is. If you've never used one of these before and you're having trouble with it, I would say that it was just not ground the way it ought to be ground. Now you can see mine now. It's still got a round to it but it's not as steep as round as it was. You can see my blade there sticking out. It matches the pretty close now. Not perfect, but it's pretty close. And the shavings aren't catching up in it much now. A little bit, but not much. They were catching up in it really bad there for a while. It's not bad now. I'll be perfectly honest with you, I still don't think I can do the detail with this. When you get down to the detail, this little sucker is hard to beat. Because I can be right there and just work, right there real close. Where this, I feel like I'm too far back away from it. My fingers are out straight. I mean, you can get quite a bit of detail with this, don't get me wrong. But if you really need detail carving, I still think you need this. No matter what kind you use, you'll have to stop and pull your shavings out every once in a while. They'll get caught up in there. Oh, you can adjust the height of this a little bit. I didn't realize that. You can get your hand a little bit closer. I like that a little bit better. I was a little bit too far out. I've got very big hands, and it didn't feel uncomfortable the other way, but I like being in a little bit closer to the plane. That feels good. I like that. Well, I'm not going to make you sit here and watch, 8 hours of this. It won't take me very long to knock it down. It might take me longer with this the first time than it would if I just used this, because I really feel like I can control this better and hit exactly where I want to hit. But this is going to save my fingers a lot, I can tell, because of the palm action. I've been carving about another 10 minutes or so on the thing, and another thing I was noticing was that the end of the plane was catching on things and would stop me. So I went and beveled off the very bull nose of the bottom of the plane, and these are just little tweaks that you might want to do to make your plane work better. Been carving about another 15 minutes, and it's starting to look pretty good on the rough out anyway. Still got a long way to go on the rough out, but it's getting down there. It doesn't take very long. It seems like it probably would take 10 times longer than using a hand grinder or something, but it doesn't. It takes a little longer, no question about it. Got the little plane tweaked out pretty good. It seems to be working pretty well now. Getting used to it is part of it. I'll probably do a few more little tweaks to it over time. But it certainly cuts better than it did when it started out this morning on this piece. What you have to do with these round bottom planes too is you can't just go in one direction. You go like this way for a little while, then you cut across those marks to keep them level. Otherwise you just get big deep grooves going. And the more curve you have, the more it wants to follow those grooves too. So I try not, that's why I was so careful about getting rid of some of the curve on the bottom of this thing. And it's still got more than I like.
Man, you see, blessed by God to design this mandolin for me. You two, friend, could own one, but time is growing thin. The carver's getting older, but he is not gone yet. Don't tarry, place your order. He'll carve a dream, it's true. Genuine and hand-produce a Rosa just for you. That's built to chop the rhythm and play a fast lead line. With calloused hands created, one plain stroke at a time. Treasured now forever, wood and heart in.
The roughing part of this is just about done. You know, is it ready to call a mandolin yet? Not by a long shot, but I may have used this all I need to use it. That only took about, well, I started at 10:14. It is now 10:52, and that included all the shenanigans I did with working on this plane, which took a pretty good amount of time. So, you know, it doesn't take long to carve all that wood off there. I don't know how much faster you could do it with an angle grinder. You know, certainly it's probably easier on your joints and your elbow and your hand and all that, but I don't mind doing it. It doesn't bother me to do it. So, you know, certainly the one advantage I have doing it this way is I don't have to go, whoops. You know, I don't have to do that because I didn't take off too much. It'd be real hard to take off too much with this. You know, taking off wood is easy. Putting it back is very difficult to do on something like this. And of course, we realize that it's really impossible to do. So, you know, you do it whatever method you want to do it, and that's no problem. I have no ill will toward you if you decide to use a grinder or, you know, something else. I know some of the big names do that in building mandolins, and I've got no problem with that. No beef with it whatsoever. You know, it's the deal of what works for you. This works for me, and I enjoy doing it. Knocking off the biggest, highest spots and the lumps and things that I can feel, and then I'm ready to go to my detail finger plane. I always leave this little flat spot in the center because that's my thickness. I know where I'm at there, and I carve up to that, and eventually right at the end that disappears. But I don't get in any hurry about getting rid of that. Alright, well, we'll call that part one of the carving, and part one is finished. Now we'll go to our detail planer, and I'll have to sharpen this with a little tool up. It's not sharp right at the moment, so we'll get it sharpened up and start on that.
A rose so sweet, it sounds so neat, a Rosa mandolin. Yes, sir, she's a beauty. If you could only see the care he took creating this mandolin for me. Thank you, Mr. Jerry, for my Rosa mandolin. It's a rose so sweet and sounds so neat, my Rosa mandolin.
I've spent 15 or so more minutes cleaning this up with the little finger plane. It's in pretty good shape. I'm going to now move over to another finger plane, exactly the same as this one. It's just that I have the tooth blade in this. Another viewer friend provided this new plane for me. I haven't really used it much yet either, though I do have the tooth blade in this new one, and that will help me level off all of this. And so I'll just, that way I don't have to switch the blades out, and that just really makes it handy. So I really appreciate the viewer that provided this little plane for me. Very nice of them. The tooth blade doesn't cut deep, it just levels up everything. It cuts across all the little grooves, and you can start to feel it pretty level when you get done with the tooth blade. It leaves scratches, obviously. And if you don't know what I mean by toothed blade, you can actually see teeth in the blade. Versus a smooth blade like this one. So, there you go. When you start getting the mandolin close to the shape you want, it's good to take like a straight edge and you look at the profile under there and you see if it's the same. It's pretty good. You know, if you see like one side sloping much faster than the other or something like that, and I just look for symmetry in terms of the curviness. Looks pretty similar. So we may be real close to the outside thickness here. I think I'll take a scraper now and clean it up with a scraper, see what it looks like then, and try to do some real detailed comparisons all over just to make sure that it's real symmetrical looking, and it feels real good already. In order to effectively smooth this out with a scraper, we need a really sharp scraper. And so a lot of people have asked me how I sharpen my scrapers, and I thought I'd just give another brush up here. I'm sure I've showed this in a video or two before. You know, first of all, I just use a cabinet scraper like this. This is what it looks like when it's fairly new. And then they look like this when they're really wore down. And to compare that, and I'm sure these aren't even made by the same company, but you can see that there's a lot of wear there considering. I'm sure it was much bigger. This is really old. The first thing I do is I just take it and I rub it like this on my sander. I have a small 2-inch belt sander, and I just rub it pretty flat, at a pretty flat angle, kind of like this on that belt sander as it's going by, and that smooths out the edge really good on one side. Once I get that smoothed out on one side, then I just take and I do the same thing on this whetstone, and I use oil. I know a lot of people these days use water, but I just old school, I guess. And I use the oil like this, and I cut into the stone with the leading edge as I'm doing this. You know, you could pull away from it, but I cut into it. I try to keep that cutting edge right on the edge of the stone, low angle, and just cut into it like that. The way you can kind of tell you're on your edge is you're picking up oil and that dark stone oil color. If you're not picking that up, you're probably not on your edge. You just do that quite a bit. This is the medium side of the stone right at the moment, because I just sanded it, so it's pretty rough at the moment. Well, it feels really sharp right there. Somewhat sharp in these areas, pretty sharp again up at the upper end. That's what typically happens. You'll get it really sharp at the ends, and the middle doesn't always get so sharp. And I'm not quite so sure why that is. It's just my technique, I guess. It's not sharp enough to shave. So we're going to go back to the drawing board, go through the stone again, and see if we can't perk this thing up. I tell you, I do spend a lot more time sharpening a scraper than I do anything else, and I'm not 100% happy with it yet. I use this little viewing device, and I can look at the edge real close and see how fine it is, and it's pretty fine. The reason it wasn't shaven before was that there was still a little bit of a burnish on the edge where I had burnished it over, and that's what we're about to do now. I think I've gotten rid of most of that now, and it's pretty darn sharp. It's not 100% shaven yet, but it does shave a little bit, and it's pretty good all over like that. Actually, it shaves better right there. Shaves pretty good in different places, but it's not 100% shaven. I've honed it a lot trying to get it better, but it's just It just takes a lot more time to do a scraper for me than it does to do, you know, a knife or a chisel or something like that. You know, people are going to say, why don't you just use glass? Why don't you just use this? Why don't you just use that? Well, you just don't understand. This is what I use. I like this. I'm being stubborn, I guess. I don't know. But it works great once you get it sharp. It's awesome once you get it sharp. And I think it's sharp enough now that I can burnish it over and it'll be satisfactory. Okay, we're going to burnish the scraper now. Got it in the vise here. This is an actual burnishing tool. If you don't have one of these and you have access to old car parts, an old valve stem off of a car, a valve stem is very hard and it'll work great too. And I've used those many years before I got this. The same side that you bevel is the side you roll over, and you try to keep it in one continuous roll. You don't want it to, you know, have a lump in it. I'm very careful when I do this that my hand doesn't slip, because I can just see this cutting the heck out of your hand. It would be horrible. And then you just get it more and more straight up and down. You curl the edge over and over more as you go each time. Now the edge is curled pretty good. Let's go see how it levels out that top. Got the tool ready to go. Let's just see how well it cleans up these scratches. I don't know if you can see the scratches. I can't tell in the viewfinder here what I'm seeing. But those scratches and different things there, I think you can see them pretty good that way. I will pull all those out of there now. That part that's curled over just grabs them and just pulls all that loose stuff and bumps out of there. It just makes it pretty much smooth as glass. Okay, so now you can probably see the difference there, how smooth it is in that area here and how rough it is in this area here still. Makes a big difference very quickly. I like it because it's contoured and kind of fits the curves of the mandolin. You know, a piece of glass, you could do the same thing if you got the right piece of glass, but you have to break your glass and get the right piece of glass. And I just like doing this. I think it's just, I'm very good with this. It's fast. You can actually carve with this. I mean, you can contour it. If you see a bump, you can just pull that bump right out. Or, you know, if the contour is not there, you just put the contour in with this. You could do this with sandpaper, but it would just take you forever, and it's hard to contour it with the sandpaper. I think we'll go with that for right now. I've spent at least another 30 minutes recarving this, actually. I took the tooth blade and put a little more swale in this area here, which, you know, brings this up a little bit smoother. It was a little bit too drop-offy for my taste. I like it to be a very smooth transition from the low spot around here to this high spot. I might just add that the thickness of this, when you start out, you don't want to start out with a 3/4 inch thick board. That'd be too thick. It's somewhere between a 1/2 inch and a 5/8 board that you want to start off with. So, you know, if you start, and I'll weigh this right now because I think I'm pretty much done with carving the outside, and I'll weigh this and give you an idea of if your top is much heavier than this, then you're probably too thick or just haven't carved enough yet or something like that. I've got it on grams, and you can see right now we're at 234 grams. I'm not saying that's a perfect weight. I'm just saying that's a target that you can use to kind of shoot for. When you think you've got your outside finished carving and this inside is still flat. Now this is spruce, by the way, so different species would weigh different. But that's 234, so 234 grams. That gives you something to shoot for. The ounces, it would be 8.3 ounces to give you just a ballpark there. This is what the mandolin top sounds like when only the outside has been carved. The inside is still perfectly flat. You can hear a little bit of sustain, but not much. Just for grins, we'll see where we're at. I know we're still way thick. We're at 390 thousandths, so we got a long way to go yet. Here's what the top sounds like, approximately halfway through the inside carving process. So we're only about halfway done. Hopefully you can tell there's a bit more sustain. The note has dropped in pitch quite a bit. Well, I'm still carving. I know, as I mentioned earlier, there's many faster ways to do this. And I guess the bottom line is I've done this for 35 years or more, and I enjoy doing it this way. I think it's the most accurate way you can carve a mandolin. I think it's the most accurate way you can carve anything, really, violin or anything. And that's the way the old masters did it. And I guess the bottom line is, if you get right down to the very bottom line, you can pay me my $6,000 to build a mandolin this way, or you can pay someone else, you know, $18,000 to $20,000 to have 99% of it carved by a machine. And they call it handmade. Well, I think this is where the old 80-20 rule comes in. I'm about 80% done. I've got about 20% more to go. And the 20% will take 80% of the time. So I'm going to have to spend a lot more time now, because I get down to the thousandth of an inch. I really am particular about carving the rest of this. It's roughed out. It's still more than plenty thick everywhere. I would say roughly 30 thousandths thick in most places, too thick. Not all places. Some places maybe only 10 or 20 thousandths too thick. But we've got a lot to go. And this is where it takes all the time. I've got my tooth blade on here now so that I've got it fairly well leveled out, but this also will keep you from cutting too deep. And you can just kind of lightly shave it off and test it with the calipers like this and see where you're at. And that's getting pretty close there, but I've still got a ways to go, so I'm going to carve a little bit more there. I like to start in the very center, get that set just about perfect, and then go from there. I would say within 10 thousandths of where I want to be there, so I think I'll stop there because the scraper will probably take me the rest of the way. And then I'll just start carving everything else down to that. It's pretty much a gentle slope to that for the most part. If you've watched my other videos on carving tops, I've got the measurements from a 1924 lower that I took apart, and I try to match those measurements pretty exact. I get very close on most of the numbers. I would say most of the numbers are within 1 or 2 thousandths. You can never be that perfectly precise, but you can be very close. You can be a lot more accurate than you might imagine if you take the time. I also feel around like this and see if I feel anything abnormal, and I do that a lot. And I go in and out like this to see if I feel anything that feels odd, because I want it to be pretty darn symmetrical inside and out. A little while ago I felt a bump on this section right here on the outside, and so I took that down with the scraper. So I'm back to good there, and it really does feel good. Now I don't feel any difference anywhere that I do that. So now it's just checking my pattern, for my thicknesses and working on that very closely. And as I've mentioned before, guys, I don't give out those final numbers. I'm not looking for anybody to make clones of my instruments. You know, I do give you a lot of information and enough to get you going and have you do a good job. You know, especially I think giving out the weight of the top as I do helps a lot, because that lets you know if you've got more carving to do. It's not to say that every single instrument comes out exactly the same, but if your numbers are significantly different, then you know you've got more carving to do. Still within about 10 thousandths of where I want to be. You know, when you're taking it off like this, it takes off maybe a thousandth, if that, unless you press really hard. Still got 8 or 9 thousandths to go there in the middle. I'm going to leave it there and just work on, I'm going to smooth out everything, and then I'm going to actually put pencil marks on here and measure everything. I might add that I never touch the inside of the instrument with sandpaper. I only use the scraper, and the reason for that is just so I'm not filling up any pores with, I don't want to fill the pores up with sawdust and things like that. And to be perfectly honest with you, I doubt that matters much on this spruce because the pores are so tiny, and it's the same way with the maple. Ironically, I like almost all the traditions about building instruments the traditional way, with the exception of their hide glue. And as I've mentioned before, I believe if Stradivari were alive today, he'd be using Titebond. And that's my 100% belief, because he always used the best of everything he could find. In his day, hide glue was the very best, and it was for hundreds of years after that. It just isn't now. I think it's also funny, people have even told me I'm lazy because I don't use hide glue. Does this process look like I'm lazy? I think some of the comments like that are the dumbest things I've ever heard. I believe we finished carving the top to my satisfaction. It really sounds good, got a real good sustain to it. Just couldn't be much better, I don't think. Very light. We're going to put it on, well, here's ounces first. It's 4.3 ounces. And here's grams, 122, it's bouncing between 122 and 124 grams, so it must be about 123 grams. You know, it's very light, very airy, very, you know, not much to it now, but yet at the same time it feels really strong because of the way it's carved. So it feels very strong, but very, very light. Now here's what the mandolin sounds like with about 99% of the carving finished. Now you should be able to hear its much deeper tone, and there should be more sustain. Okay, now I'm going to listen to it, and I'm going to snap my fingers when I can't hear the sustain any further, because I can tell the microphone's not getting it all. Right there, that long. So there is quite a bit of sustain to the top now. It's a much deeper note. I think you can certainly hear that. Very nice sounding top. So I think we're ready to move on to the next step, which would be putting the braces in and cutting the F-holes. But I think we'll save that for the next video.